Okay, great. Okay, so for the agenda for today is basically what is structure for motion and how can we basically scale structure for motion. So how many people here have kind of heard structure for motion? So starting off, like, can we try to get like a show of hands on like people who've heard structure for motion or even used it? Uh, the- I don't think there's anyone. So, well, that's great. So that means something new, right? Okay, so what exactly is structure for motion? So structure for motion is kind of the idea that we're trying to reconstruct 3D objects from a series of images. So over here, we kind of have like a picture, like a statue of a child, like a 3D object. And we have three like images over here, and we're trying to basically take these images and go the other way from like the 3D to 2D, but from like 2D to 3D. And we're trying to reconstruct the 3D structure again. So like these orange things over here, that's basically like the camera that we've like taken the pictures from. So you can see that like going around the child, like we have taken pictures of it and we're trying to reverse the process and reconstruct this 3D object. So what exactly is the key problem from actually going from the 3D world to the 2D world? So like the key issue that is like we kind of lose that depth information, right? So like when we take a picture of like a 3D thing, like all these like light particles, they kind of converge into one place and then they get put into like this like 2D like plane, right? So we kind of lose that 3D information, even though that it's coming from like 3D locations. So like how do we kind of like recover this depth information, right? So like in the classical structure for motion case, what we'd have is like a lot of cameras from like a lot of places, and then we'd kind of take pictures and then we kind of figure that out, right? But trying to not go with like such an advanced approach, we can kind of take a look at a really like simple approach. So over here in like this very simplified approach, so that we call this the stereo normal case. So we have camera A over here, which is kind of looking down at these crops. And then we have camera B over here that's also kind of looking down. So if we actually look at this scenario, right, it's kind of like how we as like humans would kind of see the world. So like inherently as humans, we can kind of tell depth information, right? So like that depth information, we kind of get it from the parallax. So like there's a really good example in this notebook over here, dense stereo vision, which actually goes into like how we can actually from the parallax kind of extract that depth information that we kind of lose when we kind of take a picture, right? So if you look at this like notebook, so it's from like the University of Virginia, Introduction to Computer Vision over here. We have two pictures. So one picture of Mr. Potato Head over here, and then there's like another picture of Mr. Potato Head. So it's like exactly like how our eyes would kind of see the world. So like from this, we can kind of like, if we kind of overlap the images, we would kind of see that the features in Mr. Potato Head would kind of move like slightly to the left or the right. So like that with that parallax information, we can technically like reconstruct that depth information. So like in the stereo normal case, the epipoles, they're kind of like parallel to each other and they're all kind of in like a straight line. So like mathematically, it's like not very like complicated to solve. So like in this case, if we look over here, what they're doing is they're computing like a disparity map, and they're using like normalized cross correlation over like a 5-pixel window to actually like do the matching between these features. So like when we mean by like doing like normalized cross correlation over 5 pixels, right? We're taking like 5 pixels here, we're like matching it over here, and we're doing that to the entire image, and then we're trying to figure out like how much each one of those like 5-pixel windows is actually moving. And from that parallax, we can kind of compute like a depth map. So over here, like we can see that like this background plane over here, it doesn't really, so it moves consistently, right? Like as a whole, but like the nose and like the body and everything, they move like to a different like parallax, right? So if we were to like reconstruct this depth, we can kind of see that it creates this map here where like the background is like still, and then you have like all this from like the parallax information. And then we can kind of like add like a texture map and make it look a little nicer. And yeah, so that's kind of how you would kind of add like depth information back into like images, right? That's a very simplified approach that we can take. So the main takeaway is that we can regain that depth information if we have more than one image. So back to the main problem, right? How do we do this entire thing where you have like so many cameras and then we figure out like where the cameras are and we can like reconstruct this entire object. So if we go down here, so there's three main steps to actually doing this, right? So it's like finding the matching points between A and B. And then after you find the matching points between A and B, we can actually compute like the epipolar lines, right? And from the epipolar lines, like we can get like an essential matrix. And then from the essential matrix, we can kind of figure out where camera B is relative to A, right? So once we have that relative information of like where the cameras are, we can use something called triangulation to actually like figure out, you know, where exactly the points are. So me saying it like that, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So like, let's take a look at this video. So, okay, so over here we have some pictures of like a castle over here. So let's just put that play. Okay, and now we are identifying the points in the image that can possibly be detected in the other image. So this is like feature extraction. So we draw dots on like each and every image to identify like unique points in every image. And like one of these dots, if we use like an algorithm like SIFT, it'll be kind of like this big vector describing this like local area. And we do that for everything, right? And then after that, we do a search for corresponding points in like the other images. So that's basically like we take the features from this image, right? And then we match the features to like this image over here. And like we do the same thing to here and do the same thing to here. So that's basically trying to figure out like if we have a window here, right? That's going to be the same window here. That's going to be the same window here. And that's going to be the same window here. And if we know, like if this window is here, but then it's like moving to over here, like that, we can like kind of like mathematically compute like how the camera is kind of moving through the world. And that's where kind of the epipoles, like we can calculate the epipoles. So like moving on, compute the camera positions and 3D positions such that the corresponding views, viewing rays intersect. So this video is kind of like glossing over like how you'd actually like calculate camera A's position and camera B's position and like straight away diving into like multi-view stereo, but we'll go over that in a tiny bit. So over here, it assumes that we kind of figured out like where the cameras are relative to each other from those images. Like that's not going to magically happen. We need to calculate it. So over here we have like camera A, B, C, and D, and we know like the red point is like probably the window, the green point is probably like a door or something, and we have it all in this setup, right? So if we shoot rays like through like this imaginary image over here, we call this the virtual image, and then this is like the projection center. We shoot rays from like each and every like projection center through the corresponding points. they will technically intersect somewhere in 3D. But theoretically, like it doesn't have to intersect because, like, just because they're kind of heading in the same direction doesn't mean they intersect. Like in that case, we kind of like take the points where the vectors are orthogonal to each other, and we kind of find the middle point there. And we kind of do that for everything, but like, yeah, that's just simple geometric triangulation, but moving on. So we do that for like every point here, feature that we kind of find. So it's like the window, the door, or whatever. And we're basically creating this 3D map of it from like these intersecting points that we kind of triangulate. So after we do that, we have this really nice 3D reconstruction of the castle. Oh, wow, that was really simple, right? Okay. So like in the video at the end, they're basically showing us like the points do kind of form surfaces. So over here, there's like one surface. Over here, we have like a really round surface, another round surface. And then that's like various algorithms that we can use to reconstruct the surfaces. But we'll just cut this video here for now. Yeah, so like now that we went through that, let's actually get into like the meat and potatoes of it. So over here we have some utility libraries that are bringing in. So it's like the matplotlib and like the OS. And also we're bringing in OpenCV and NumPy over here. We are not going to use anything like Open3D or like anything like crazy here. So it's just numbers. So over here we are loading the like SFM dataset. This is just a class to kind of do that. Okay, so loading in the statue dataset. Actually, I actually don't have the statue dataset on my computer right now. It's on like the Docker thing over here, but we can kind of, actually I need to run everything, right? Let me just run everything. Then we can kind of see like what the dataset actually looks like. Or at least a small idea of what the dataset looks like. Should load. And yeah, so this is an image from the dataset that we're going to reconstruct. So we have a lady like on a pedestal over here. Oh, and over here we're loading in the statue dataset into this class that we created. So inside the class, it's just storing the images in like an array, and also has like some utility functions to find the pose and some other stuff, but we'll go through that. So over here we have like the intrinsics where we are loading like the projection matrix, and then we have like the calibration matrix. I know they kind of look the same, like projection matrix is just the calibration matrix with like this like row over here, column over there. Okay, so moving on, we have like the utility functions to aid with the reconstruction. So this is the triangulation function that we're using. So it's like not using simple geometric triangulation. We're doing some SVD and figuring that part out. And so this is some other stuff. And then over here, we're kind of calculating the camera position from the essential matrix. So the essential matrix describes like how the epipoles would kind of translate one image's point to another image's point, right? So like if we can compute the essential matrix, we can kind of extrapolate and kind of figure out camera position of like the second camera. So we're kind of considering the first camera to be the world origin camera. And once we compute the essential matrix, we can kind of calculate the position of like the second camera. And then we have like correspondence matrix, compute image to image matrix. So this is like using the 8-point algorithm to actually calculate the essential matrix, where we actually taking 8 points, and from those 8 points, where we can kind of compute like the epipolar lines and come up with the essential matrix over here. So like we're doing all the calculations in homogeneous coordinates. So we have like this other utility function to convert between Cartesian to homogeneous. Okay, so first thing, right? Finding the correspondency points. So in this example, we are going to be using the SIFT feature detector. So SIFT is like a patented thing, and I don't think commercially you can actually use it. So most projects use something like OBO something. But over here, since it's not really commercial, we'll use SIFT. Because like if we are going to be like doing something like this, we do need to put in a lot of compute power to actually finding the features at this step. Because like if we match the wrong features in like future steps, it's going to be very kind of computationally intensive to kind of figure that out. And like dealing with outliers, you don't want to do that, especially here. So over here, we compute like the SIFT features. And then over here, we're kind of getting the key points and the descriptors. And we are matching everything over here. And we're also applying live lobes, SIFT matching ratio test over here. And then another thing we're doing is applying ransack. So ransack is like an algorithm that can kind of figure out like from the epipoles, like if it's kind of matching and it's in the thing, and like if it doesn't kind of fit the homography, it kind of just gets rid of it. So like that's also another layer of like outlier detection we are doing. So like after we do all that outlier detection, we can kind of give out the good matching pairs. So after we have these matching pairs, right? So what we want to do is find the camera position. So like we want to find RT in this case. So that's the camera matrix of B we want to find. Because camera matrix of A, like as we said like earlier, that's going to be the world origin camera, which is going to be like having like identity matrix as like the rotation matrix, and it's going to be 0, 0, 0 in the XYZ. So that's just going to be like in the origin, and the other camera is just going to be like somewhere out in the world, and we're going to be like projecting the points from those and figuring it out. So like finding camera position. So this is like calculating the extrinsics over here. We take the points that we kind of found, and we're going to compute the normalized like essential matrix over here. And then after we like compute the essential matrix, we can like compute the 4 possible camera matrices. So when we actually like compute the essential matrix, we just don't directly get the camera matrices. So we had to like solve for like which one's the correct one. So it's like they're just checking each thing with like checking if the points kind of align or not over here. And at the very end, we have figured out P1 and P2. So P1 is the world origin camera, and the P2 is going to be like that other camera that's going to be like somewhere out in the world. So P2 is, and maybe we'll get to that later actually. So like over here, we have like the triangulation part where we can give these P1 and P2 and kind of compute the 3D points from the features. So we give the good matches over here, and then we have P1 and P2, and then we're using that triangulation function that we kind of described earlier to actually triangulate everything and reconstruct the points. So it's like really easy at this point because we have everything we need, and we create the 3D points, and now we're just plotting it on Matplotlib. Might not be the most ideal place to plot a 3D point cloud, but we can have a look at that soon. And over here, we're just taking all the functions that we described, just running through it, like step 1, step 2, step 3. So like let's kind of take a look at the stuff we just created. So this is the essential matrix we found, and then camera A, world origin camera. We have the identity matrix as the rotation matrix here, and we have 0, 0, 0, like that's the positions. And camera B is going to be somewhere out in the world. So this translation over here, that is going to be like of size 1, because like from the essential matrix, like we can't really get like a sense of scale. So it's just like arbitrarily like out there by like 1 unit vector. And then we have like this, like the rotations over here. And we have whatever it's created here. So like it's kind of figured out that it's on a pedestal and like it's like has the structure. So you can see like the legs are kind of like further away from the pedestal, and you have like the head here and like the legs and then the pedestal. So it's got the general shape of it. Also, like we're just using 2 cameras, so we can't really expect all that much. So in like a later reconstruction, we can see like with more points, it does become like a bit better. But also you can't really expect too much from like just NumPy and some OpenCV. So okay, and just to summarize, we have the input images, we do the feature detection, and then we can like find the features between these images and kind of like compute the camera pose. And then from this camera pose, we can do the triangulation to kind of figure out where each and every point is out in the world. And from that, we can get like this initial model over here. And then there's like a few other steps we can do. So there's bundle adjustment, and then there's like, we get the final model, I guess. There's like a few things that we can do. So bundle adjustment is like you have all the cameras and then all cameras and all the points. And we're just trying to minimize the reprojection error. So we can just reproject and see if the rays are intersecting or not. And we just try to minimize that. And it's like a big least squares problem. So I think a few like helpful resources, like if like anyone's interested in like learning about like structure from motion, is Dr. Cyril's channel over here. Let me try going here. So he does like really good videos. He's like from the University of Bonn. And it's like a bunch of videos on like structure from motion, robotics, and like all that stuff, if anyone's like interested. And then we have like this SFM tutorial and this thing over here. So this is like kind of a like a step-by-step tutorial on everything I just kind of mentioned, but like done in like a different way. So here, so over here it says, let's take it large scale, right? So in theory, like we have all these little bits, right? And what we're trying to do here is kind of take them from like these tiny processes and be able to do them in a much more parallel way. So let's take it to scale. So what can we technically make parallel really easily, right? So initially, what we can kind of take parallel is like the individual image pre-processing steps and like the feature detection, right? Because we don't really rely on any kind of data pairing between like these images. So if you have like image 1 and image 2, you don't need to do like anything between the 2 images. So like it's really easy. We can just like go straight up, right? We can parallelize that process pretty easily. But when we want to kind of take like parallelize the entire process, we need to kind of bundle up cameras. And like after we bundle the cameras up, we can take these camera batches and then kind of parallelize them really easily. So in this diagram, we can kind of see, so after we do this entire thing over here, we're gonna be, so like the shuffle part, like we'll take a look at that later, but like what we are doing is like we're pairing all these cameras up. And then after we pair these cameras up, we can kind of like bring them all together. And at the very end, we're doing, so we do all these steps, right? So we do 8-point algorithm, triangulation, perspective endpoint. Perspective endpoint, that's like a different thing that we kind of add later on to register like a 3rd camera or like a 4th camera or a 5th camera. And then we do triangulation. And then at the end, we can, like from these overlapping cameras, we can kind of stitch this entire thing together. So we can like compute much larger things. So this process is actually called block partitioning and merging. So like block partitioning and merging is not really like that new of a concept. There have been like a few papers well, not a few papers. I found one paper written about like block partitioning and merging, and that's kind of like what inspired me to make block partitioning and merging, but with Apache Spark, which actually like takes like this entire concept of actually like doing block partitioning and merging, and tries to do it on Apache Spark. Since like a few issues we had with like doing block partitioning and merging, like in general, was like we had to write these like large distribution algorithms that, you know, like would go wrong, or like one node wouldn't start and then something else would happen, and then everything just doesn't go nicely. So a really easy way to like avoid all that is, you know, just use Spark, and you can just have this like time tested tool just do everything for you, right? So over here we have like, what's a really good reliable way to do this without writing a bunch of distribution code? And we have Apache Spark. So like when we're doing it with Apache Spark, we just need to kind of do it in terms of like maps and reduces. So I kind of have like a small explanation video that I've made on YouTube over here. Wait, let me just quickly share it with audio, just really quickly. Window, then give me 1 second. Share with audio. Okay, hopefully you guys can hear it, right?
A unique approach for block partitioning and merging for large-scale structure from motion using Apache Spark. When we break down the title, it essentially describes an approach for distributed structure from motion. But why is it crucial to distribute structure from motion, and what exactly does structure from motion mean? Structure from motion involves reconstructing the structure of an object by analyzing its motion. In this case, motion refers to a series of images captured by a camera. By utilizing a sequence of images, we can reconstruct the three-dimensional structure of the object. There are a few fundamental steps involved in SFM: key point detection, feature matching, motion estimation, triangulation, bundle adjustment. Why is it important to distribute SFM workloads? Some SFM reconstructions can take days or even weeks to complete. Consequently, it has become increasingly common to distribute the workload across smaller datasets and leverage the computational power of multiple computers. By employing this approach, which is known as block partitioning and merging, we can significantly reduce the overall reconstruction time and enhance the efficiency of the structure from the motion process. This, however, is nothing new. Why Apache Spark? Apache Spark is a distributed computing framework with a great track record of being able to improve the computation time needed to process datasets. Leveraging the fact it can store the entire dataset in RAM as well as orchestrate the processing of large amounts of data. At the end of the day, images are like any other type of data and can be processed on Spark. How to do block partitioning and merging on Spark? Without going into too much detail, the basic concept is that we can take the mat image objects in OpenCV and use Spark maps to do parallel image processing needed before we block partition it into sub-datasets. The block partitioning is done using a shuffle. The exact block partitioning algorithm can be found on my GitHub. Once the sub-datasets are created using a shuffle, the sub-datasets are mapped as normal and each of the steps can be done, such as pose estimation, triangulation. Finally, another shuffle is done to merge all the subsets, and with all the point and pose data, we can use overlapping cameras to stitch the whole thing together. Bundle adjustment can be done at any point to improve the accuracy, but in this case wasn't considered. After stitching, we have the final point cloud. In conclusion, this study demonstrates an alternative way to distribute SFM workloads utilizing Apache Spark. But the main takeaway being writing distribution mechanisms doesn't have to be tedious. But in fact, we could most probably process any kind of data on Spark as long as you get a little creative.
Okay, so that was the video. Wait, let me go back to the presentation. And I think we can dive right into the block partitioning and merging code with Apache Spark. Okay, does anyone have any questions up till so far about like structure for motion or anything? Just put that down here. Oh, okay. We'll save it to the end, I guess. So going over here, we have like the actual like distribution code over here. So we start off with like a Spark session that we are kind of initializing, and then we, in the same way, we just like load up the data set with like all the parameters. So another thing we're actually setting up over here is like the start index and index, and then the block size, the overlap of like the data set that we want to actually have. And at the end, we are doing this. Okay, so this is like a intermediary thing that they're calculating. And over here, we load it into like the class that keeps all the data. And we kind of go through this entire process of actually like generating a map of like how we're actually going to partition all the blocks. And then like we use this expand data function to actually expand the data. And so like this is actually like first like generating the map with like a key and like everything. Like if like a certain block has like a specific key, it assigns it in like a very specific way. So once we like expand the data, and if we do this group by key function, it like reduces it down to like a structure where it like it's like separated into these proper blocks. And then after that, we, for each and every like block partition, right, we kind of run the same registration algorithms. Then we run like perspective endpoint, and it is a perspective endpoint thing. And then we can register new cameras. And at the very end, we have like the merging algorithm, which actually like merges all the data, and not really merges all the data, just like takes these individual block partitions and is able to actually like connect them and actually make use of like this data. So each and every like block partition, it has its own scale, right? Since like when we actually like compute a thing, like we have camera A and B, and that is like a unit vector, and that actually sets the entire scale for each block partition. Like later on, it kind of figures out like from this, like how we can actually bring it out into a singular scale, and it kind of, you know, binds it all together and creates like this final like 3D point cloud. So let me just give it a run. Not sure if it'll crash my PC or not, but we will give it a go. Should probably start off with the running. So it's generating the maps. So like most of the code is actually like not here. It's like inside these camera, point cloud, and SFM files over here. Let's give it a run. Actually, might not be the best idea of running this just live. Okay, registering cameras. So actually, meanwhile that is happening, it'll probably like run through everything and generate like a cool point cloud. But so this is kind of the actual object we actually get at the end of the day. So if I download this and load it up, it's not like very impressive. Like it's going to be a very like tiny thing. Usually like SFM workloads, they take like quite a while to actually generate a thing. But you can kind of tell like we have the base of the thing, and also like we can see like the legs, they're slightly like away from this, and we have the bus, and then we have like the head of it, and it generates like this 3D model, right? So anyway, we can always like improve this by increasing the number of features, doing bundle adjustment and everything. But like this was kind of made to theoretically just show like how we could theoretically like take this process parallel using Apache Spark. Yeah, so same like point cloud, like with a few extra things. Yeah, so then we at the end we're just generating the 3D model using like this alpha algorithm. Yeah. So I think that's the end of it. So thank you guys for listening. Are there any questions like so far from anyone? Okay. In that case, nothing from.
Sorry, sorry, Hansa. Do you have any benchmarks? Your Spark approach versus the usual?
Oh, I don't think like we have any benchmarks because we needed to actually do it at like a large enough scale, and I don't really have access to like a Spark cluster, so like I didn't really do any benchmarks. So it was mainly just to show that like we can do it with maps and reduces and in like a Spark environment.
Got it. And are there other kind of more efficient alternatives, like your method being one?
Yeah, so like the other alternative is like that one other paper that I found for block partitioning and merging. Like I feel like it should be a much like broader idea, but maybe like commercially they kind of found it and then they want to kind of hide it and use that commercially, and maybe that's why we don't really find too many papers on like the distribution process of it, or they just vertically scale and just have massive computers. So that's what I think.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, I think we can close this session off, right?
Yeah, sounds good. If anybody has, any other piece of work they've done, for academics or any side projects they want to showcase, we'd like to open this up as a kind of recurring set of sessions. So next week we'll hear from, I believe, Chandra, and we have a few others planned. But if you have any proposals, please give me a buzz and we'll work it in. Thank you. Thanks, Hansa.
Okay, thank you guys. Thanks, Yasser.